but it was painful to see Ohio State lose the way they did because they're so close, and Purdue especially too, because I thought I was being a little bold picking Purdue to win on the radio show last week, and if it wasn't for just basically handing Oregon 15 other points, they would have won. But Jordan, what's your take on the Big Ten's performance last weekend?
I was impressed with Ohio State. They're a team that last year made a joke of the Big Ten when they had to play at the Coliseum. They called it the collision at the Coliseum and ended up not being much of a collision at all.
Like a train wreck.
Yeah, exactly, a Big Ten train wreck at the Coliseum. But you really have to admire the way they actually did play tough. They held them. I mean, they basically held them to the end of the game. It was a game deep into the fourth quarter, but I'm not happy with the way the game finished because they needed to win that game for the Big Ten, and they were in the position to win that game for the Big Ten. It's almost like their defense went out there and thought USC's offense was just going to sit back and be as ineffective as they had all game. I felt like USC's offense went out there on that last drive with Joe McKnight. They went out there to win the game, and Ohio State's defense went out there not to lose the game. If you kind of see what I mean, they were overly cautious and ended up just losing their intensity, playing not to lose rather than playing to win. I was very impressed with Michigan. Not a huge Rich Rodriguez fan, but I do think he's got his players he's got the personnel that he needs and wants. Last year, it was kind of mixed in that team, and their coach just never mixed. But now he has the right personnel. Purdue, you mentioned their offense giving away 15 points to Oregon. That ended up being the clincher. And then, I guess if you just go down the line, Wisconsin was a very close game, and Fresno State's not quite what they were going into last season. You look at what that game was last season. I think it was a top 20 matchup. Mm-hmm. And both programs have kind of taken big steps back since then. And, besides that, the Indiana Northwestern, Michigan State was overhyped to start with. I really don't understand where people got off giving them such high props, losing most of their two crucial members of their offense, and then maintaining a high ranking after not really finishing that strong, not winning a single big game last year. So overall, I agree with Mike. It hasn't changed much, the perception of the Big Ten. Apparently no one even cared that Iowa blew out a Big 12 team because we moved back in the rankings. Mm-hmm. So perception of the Big Ten, again, is still very weak. And it's a shame because I do think that we will beat some teams this year. But, we've got, another week or so to kind of prove we can win these non-conference games before the Big Ten season starts.
We're going to transition now to our next topic, Coach's Hot Seat time. We're a couple games into the season, so we can officially talk about this. Who has the hottest seat? Submitted for your guys' approval. I'm going to submit Dan Hawkins. Dan Hawkins, 0-2 this year at Colorado. He's his fourth year at Colorado. His first 3 years, he hasn't had a winning season. Last year, they didn't go to a bowl game. They've been outscored 43-6 in the first halves of both their games. And let me remind you who they played their first two games. Toledo, who won 3 games last year, and then they played Colorado State in Boulder, losing both those games. And that Toledo game was absolutely embarrassing. And who do they got up ahead? They got to host Wyoming in Boulder. Well, hey, Wyoming went to Rocky Top and won last year. Wyoming hung with Texas for a half last week. And let's just say they beat Wyoming. Who do they got up ahead? They got to go to West Virginia. They got to go to Texas. Then they got to go to Oklahoma State. So Dan Hawkins, and this is what he said at media day. I quote, 10 wins, no excuses. Well, he's going to have to win the rest of his games to get 10 wins, and I don't think that looks realistic right now. Any of you guys want to submit a name to the hot seat list?
I agree with you on Dan Hawkins, without a doubt. Two guys I want to put in there, and this is weird. This is a weird one because I don't know if he's ever necessarily been in a hot seat, but Steve Spurrier is really not doing a good job at South Carolina with the athletes that he's recruiting and bringing in. I just don't think, we saw in the bowl game, they ran a light practice week. They didn't care. They just didn't seem to care much. Steve Spurrier, granted he's Spurrier, so you don't know if he'll be put on a hot seat. It just doesn't seem like it works that way for guys like him. But he really, performance-wise, for the talent they have on that team, he doesn't do much with it. And I think he forced their best quarterback basically out of South Carolina, which was Smelly. Charlie Weiss, they look like, again, they've got talent. You saw that billboard those linebackers put up. The alumni has a strong, strong influence on Notre Dame. And I think that people are really jabbing at if they don't go to the BCS this year, they're not going to be happy, and it'll be a shaky situation for them. Losing that game to Michigan, even though Notre Dame looked very good, they lost the game, and that's what they care about in the end. And someone else that's not going to be on a hot seat to be fired, but maybe on the hot seat, kind of like Lloyd Carr was, to kind of let the next guy come in and take over. Bobby Bowden, I think over the last 5 years has really lost his touch and his control of his team at Florida State, and Jimbo Fisher might be lined up to kind of come in there sooner than a lot of people think.
Mike, who else is feeling the heat?
Well, I'm going to first off agree with the Charlie Weiss choice. I think if Michigan State beats Notre Dame, it doesn't matter what happens. I mean, I guess if they won out and they beat USC, then Charlie Weiss will keep his job. If they lose to Michigan State, he's going to be done at the end of the season. I know this is a curveball, but I think Chip Kelly at Oregon needs to watch out. I think we could easily see a scenario where Mike Bellotti takes that team back. It could be mid-season.
I would totally
It could
agree.
be after one season, but
And
watch out.
because he's the athletic director.
I just think Chip Kelly needs to really get that team together and really get their heads on straight. Because Purdue, I like what Danny Hope's doing. I like Danny Hope, and I like Purdue, but they're not really that talented yet. And Oregon, with the talent that they have on the field and on paper, should not have squeaked out a win at home against a Purdue team like that and given up 36 points.
Or even lost to Boise State.
Absolutely. So,
way too talented.
Big game for Charlie Weiss this weekend. If they lose to Michigan State, he might be done no matter what. And Chip Kelly needs to watch out. Bellotti might take that team back.
Yeah, Notre Dame better be lighting a lot of candles before that USC game, because that's going to be a tough one to win. I agree with all of you, except I don't think Bobby Bowden, I don't even think the seat's warm, because they're still going to bowl games. I know they aren't really ranked, that predominant top 10 team, perennial top 10 team every year. But he's a legend. He made Florida State what it is. It's kind of like when Joe Paterno had those seasons where they didn't even go to bowl game. And the seat may be a little warm, but I don't think there's any chance of him maybe even being forced to step down. But I do like the Chip Kelly too, because especially what happened the after the game antics that happened over in Boise, you got to think the seats get a little warmer there, especially with the expectations. I mean, this was a top 15, top 20 team coming into the season, so that's
no one thought Lloyd Carr was going to be on the hot seat either, though. If you're talking, that's just my argument for Bowden. Mm-hmm. And then he loses to a 1AA team. Had Jacksonville State been able to hold on and beat Florida State in Tallahassee,
yeah.
You never know. I mean, no one ever thought Lloyd Carr would be in that kind of situation, being forced out of Michigan, the school he took, to the top.